All right, so the first data format we're going to start with is CSV because it's simple. So here I'm in my data format CSV folder, and I have this file.csv file. If I look in VS Code, I have the exact same data format CSV folder open with file.csv inside. Now, if we open that CSV file inside of Excel, then Excel displays the data within the file as if it were in a spreadsheet format. So we can see the first row here has a bunch of column headers, and the second and third rows, each of these basically is like a record, like in a database. And so the values in each column are essentially, appropriate based on what we see the column headers being. Now, if we minimize this and take a look at it in a text reader, kind of like Notepad, then we actually see the comma separated values. And this is why it's named that way. Now, if we had a record, for example, on a row and that person didn't have a last name, then you would still see two commas, right? You'd see a comma indicating that you had just finished typing in the first name, and then there is no value for the last name here between these two commas, but you still need both commas, one to indicate the end of the first name field, one to indicate the end of the last name field, and so on. Okay, so we'll go ahead and undo that. And then this file here, example.py, is some Python code. And what we're going to do is open up a terminal, and we're going to talk through the commands that we see here. So we're just going to type it into the live interpreter so that you can see how this works. This is similar to reading and writing other files. Now, I've got Python 3 installed on Windows, so the Windows launcher says I have to type in pi-3 to launch that version of Python. I also have Python 2 installed. And here you can see that I'm running Python 3.83, and this is the Python interpreter, which allows us to execute Python code or commands and see what's happening interactively, as opposed to putting all the same commands up here into a file and then running that file. So the first thing we're going to do up at the very top is we're going to import CSV. And CSV is just a library that's purpose-built for reading CSV files and writing CSV files. It comes installed with Python 3, so there's nothing additional that you need to install, but it isn't loaded by default, so we just have to import it here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to read CSV the old way, and that will become clearer what I mean as I explain. So first, we're going to create a variable called filehandle, and we're going to assign the value of that variable to file.csv opened in read mode. So we're going to open the file in read mode, and we're going to stuff the contents into this object called filehandle. And if we look at that object, it's an IO type object, input output, and it's got a type of basically a text IO wrapper. Okay, that's fine. We can see the name of the file and the mode of the file and the encoding. Now we're going to create this reader object equals CSV. So we're going to use the CSV library, and we're going to use a reader method, and we're going to pass in our IO object, and that is really going to create a new type of object, which is a CSV reader object. We can see that right here. Okay, and then we're going to that object essentially is a number of rows, okay? And so whenever you have something that you can iterate through, like this file has a number of rows, we basically can say, for each row, grab the data from that row and stick it in a list, okay? That's what we're doing right here. This is called list comprehension. It's all we're doing is looping through the rows in the file and creating a list of each row, okay? It's not entry-level syntax, but it's something that you can read about, and you'll start using when you get more familiar with Python. So let's go ahead and type that in down here. List of rows equals row for row in reader object. Okay, so if I do a type on list of rows, that variable we just created, it should be a list. And if I want to see the value of that list, I just type in the name of the variable, and then we see what's inside of it. And what we see is that we have a list of rows. This is the first row, this is the second row, and this is the third row. And so we have a list of lists, right? The first list contains all of the values in the first row, right? A list of columns or values in that first row. So so hopefully that's clear. Now, since we're done reading the file, we're going to go ahead and close the file by typing in file handle close. And this essentially just says, okay, I'm done reading the data in the file. I don't need to hold that open in memory anymore. I can close it and give those resources back to the machine. And now I can say for row in list of rows, print row. Okay, so here we are essentially seeing the same data that's inside this CSV file, but now we're seeing each row captured as a list of values, and each of the values represents a different column. Okay, so these are our comma separated values. Now that's the first way to read a file, and it's the old way because you manually open the file and then you manually close the file. The new way is to use something called a context manager, and the syntax for that starts here with open the file as some file handle, and then there's going to be some indented commands underneath that context manager. And when you reach the last command, as soon as you basically hit enter, then it's going to automatically close this file. Notice that we don't have filehandle.close down here after list of rows like we do up here. That's because we're using the context manager. So we're going to go ahead and open the same file as file handle, and reader object equals CSV reader, and we'll type in, or we'll pass in the file handle. And list of rows, we'll go ahead and overwrite that, but we're typing in the exact same command, so it's gonna have the exact same data in it. Okay, and as soon as I hit enter right here, it's going to close that file automatically and give the resources back to the machine. So it's just a more modern, more convenient way that prevents you from forgetting to give resources back to your machine. And then now that we've created that list of rows, we can do the exact same thing as we did earlier. For row in list of rows, print row. Okay, now let's go ahead and write a new row. Okay, so we need to create a new record in this file. We have John, we have Bob, both last name of Smith, maybe they're brothers, and they have another brother named Tim who's 42 and he's going to be funny. So we need to create this record, and the way we do that is here with this command, right? I showed you that each row basically is a list of values, and so we need to create this data, which is our new row, to also be a list of values. So Tim Smith, age 42, and true, he is funny. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up our context manager to open the file, and we're going to do it not in read mode this time, but in append mode. So if I did a W right here, this would overwrite all the contents of the file, including the first row, which has our column headers in it. So we don't want that to happen. So we want to append to the end of this existing file and as file handle, and then we will create a writer object now using the CSV writer method. We'll pass in our file handle, and then writer object dot write row data. Okay, so we're going to write a new row of data, data being this list of values, to that file. So as soon as I hit enter right here, it will attempt to write the data to the file and then close the file. Now the problem is we've got permission denied, and this is something that you're going to have to get used to when you are coding in Python. You're going to get errors, okay? You need to learn how to troubleshoot. So you can copy and paste this into something like Stack Overflow or Google and say, writing file, and then paste in this error message, and you'll get hints about what's going on. Now, the reason you can't write a file, a common reason that you're unable to write a file, is that file is open. And we have the file open right up here, so I'm going to close it. We also have it open in Excel, so I'm going to close that. And then what we're going to do is just type those exact same commands again. So we're going to reopen the file in append mode, and we're going to create our writer object. And then we're going to use that writer object along with the write row method and pass in our data. And again, as soon as I hit enter here, There we go. Now we have success. And I think this indicates maybe the number of characters that we wrote to the file, something like that. But in any case, that's an indicator of success, right? We didn't get permission denied this time. So now if we go look at our file, we now see Tim Smith 42 true, and we can do the same thing by looking at it from the Excel software, which makes it appear in spreadsheet format. So this shows you a very easy way to read and write information from a CSV file. And network engineers will, from time to time, have to ingest information that was captured from a spreadsheet or something like that. So you can simply take an Excel file, save it as CSV format, and then you can use this method to read data in from that file into Python, right? So that you can then do something with that data, manipulate it, process it, reformat it, or whatever your specific needs are. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching. We'll cover the next data format in the next video.